Well, hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast. We are back less than 24 hours after we finished our last tennis podcast. We've had a whole day without tennis. We miss it. We're raring to go. David, live from Solihull. How are you doing?
I spend so much time campaigning for the season to be shorter and a longer off season. And in the last few hours, I've having sort of rebounded from the ATP finals concluding and thinking, oh, I'm never going to get into another one of these events. And now suddenly finding that I am into the Davis Cup finals, I've started to think, oh no, I'm not looking forward to the off season very much when there's no tennis. So yes, it didn't take me long after that pretty good final, really, 2 sets between Sinner and Alcaraz. But after that, I did think, oh, no Sinner in this, no Alcaraz Sinner final. Am I really going to be that into it? And then I started to look at the lineup of the quarterfinals and remember what it's actually like when it gets going, and thought, yeah, I am into this. So let's have it.
David's going to be a UTS guy in December.
I have my
miss
limits.
Tennis that much. Live from Bologna, Matt Roberts. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. I did wonder what I was doing when I was at Heathrow at 6:30 a.m. in the dark this morning. But
it's bad when it's dark, isn't it?
Oh,
You're in a
it's
travel situation and the sun hasn't come up. It's
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah, you know the feeling. But delighted to be here in Bologna. Kind of got a spring in my step, actually. A new venue for these Davis Cup finals, which I think sort of helps give the event a bit of fresh impetus. And yeah, I've had a nice day on site, familiarising myself with the venue, and now back at the hotel, talking to my favourite people for the podcast, and raring to go for the first quarterfinal tomorrow.
Viewers on YouTube being treated to a little glimpse of Matt's hotel room in Bologna. Looks very nice. Some nice soft furnishings, a little bit of low lighting. You
Yes.
happy?
Well, I got here and it wasn't ready, so I had to
That's bad as well.
I had to dump my suitcase and then went straight to site, and I've only literally just got back to the hotel, so I've spent only about 10 minutes in the room. But no, it looks pretty nice. There's a slightly complex system which I'm a bit worried about in terms of do not disturb. It's not a physical do not disturb sign. You have to press a button.
Oh yeah,
and
very modern, Matt. Sexy
quite
modern
fancy.
hotel.
Yeah, although some people I've been working with saying it's not a great system, and suddenly they find themselves with someone in their room unexpectedly.
Like our old Airbnb host that snuck in and didn't realise I was napping. Oh, Paris. On the subject of hotel rooms not being ready, this is bringing back a Champions Tour event I went to in Italy where my hotel room wasn't ready, and it had been a bad travel situation, and I went to sleep on a sort of soft bench in the lobby, and I got woken up by Thomas Enquist. So there we go.
Just underlining your ability to sleep anywhere.
Yep. I was just right in front of the revolving doors, making my point. I thought the threat of a sort of dishevelled girl sleeping in their lobby might hurry them along with preparing my room.
Tactical sleep.
They were fine with it. They were like, that's worse for you than it is for us. Matt, your impressions, your day one impressions of, look, I know it's early days, but of the city, of the new venue for these Davis Cup finals. How have you found it all?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen much of the city yet at all. I literally have just been to the hotel briefly and the site. What I will say is that some colleagues I'm with here are a little disappointed about the slight lack of sort of branding all over the city. When we were in Malaga the last few years, you knew the Davis Cup finals was going on. There was posters everywhere and branding everywhere. It doesn't quite seem like Bologna has replicated that. They did have an event in the town yesterday, I think that was, a sort of welcome event where players sort of walked along a carpet and posed for photos. And I think there was a bit of sort of fanfare around that. But otherwise, it does feel a little bit more low-key. So that's something to sort of keep an eye on, I suppose, as the event starts, whether that feeling will grow at all in the city. And it's a pretty small city, so you would hope that they will get behind it.
If that is the case, that is a shame, because that is one of the best things about a big event being held in a smaller place, the way it feels like the biggest thing that's happening in that place. Turin feels like that with the ATP finals, the way they totally embrace it and lean into it. But interesting.
Now, Bologna has been used as a city for the Davis Cup group stages when we had those in this new revamped Davis Cup. Bologna held group stages in 2022, 2023 and 2024. However, then it was played at the Unipol Arena, but that was deemed not big enough for the finals, and also Radiohead are playing the Unipol Arena, I think 4 nights there this weekend and start of this week. So we're in a new venue. So for anyone who did go to those Davis Cup finals in Bologna in 2022 to 2024, we're not there. We're at a different venue in the Bologna Fiere, which is like a sort of massive exhibition centre in the kind of businessy district of Bologna. And there are basically a lot of vast buildings on this space, and 4 of them are being used by the Davis Cup finals over this next week. The main stadium court is in what they call Pavilion 37, and there's a...
That sounds like the title of a dystopian novel.
It's giving Hunger Games, isn't it?
Yeah, set in a dystopian future. Yeah. Where aliens have taken us over. Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
But there is already a temporary stadium there, which is where the Virtus Bologna basketball team play, and that is where the Davis Cup finals are being held. They've slightly altered the seating arrangement to make it better for tennis viewing, and all told, there's going to be about 10,000 seats. And I must say, it looks pretty impressive. I think I was lucky enough today to be able to go right courtside, and it's a different vibe to Malaga. Malaga was sort of quite steep. This is much more shallow, but the court is really surrounded by seats. And I think if it's going to be full, and I think ticket sales have been pretty good, we should get a pretty good noise inside that 10,000 seat arena.
And this will be the venue for however long the finals are held in Bologna. I can't quite remember the length of the contract. It's not like once Radiohead are gone, they'll go back to the other venue. This is not a Radiohead specific situation.
No, I think it's more to do with the fact that the other arena could host like a group stage, but it couldn't host the whole finals, because the other thing that they've got, there's another pavilion next to Pavilion 37. There's Pavilion 36, and that's where the media centre is. It's where the press conferences are going to be, and it's also where the teams have their locker rooms, the gyms, the practice courts, and it's a massive, massive building. So it's a big site that we're on. You know, if I want to go from my seat in the media centre to my seat on court, you know, it's a 10-minute walk. It's a commitment. Yeah. So that's the kind of scale that we're talking about. But as I said, the stadium looks good. I think a lot of the tickets were actually bought by locals. You know, we sort of know how much Italy likes its tennis, especially at the moment. But we're very hopeful as well that because we've got 7 European nations here, we're hopeful that there will be plenty of travelling support as well for the teams. You know, we don't have USA or Canada or Australia, who obviously giants of the sport and real mainstays of Davis Cup and great Davis Cup nations. But with the finals being held in Europe, as they have been for the last few years, typically those nations have not had lots of support, and their ties have felt, maybe not quite traditionally Davis Cup. I think just with the spread of teams this year, because 7 are from Europe and the other one is Argentina, and I don't think Argentina has ever played a sporting event without having incredible support. I think there's a general feeling and hope that we should have some pretty good atmospheres this week inside that stadium.
Okay, sounds good. You went to some press conferences today. Who did you stumble upon?
I went to the Italian press conference to end the day. That was at 7:00 local time, quite late for a press conference. I think the Italian team had been on site for quite a long time as well. They were quite weary, I would say. It wasn't the most dynamic press conference you've ever been in, but
God, and these are the last ones standing. These are the least weary of all the Italian men.
Right. And look, there's
Supposedly.
there was quite a lot of Italian journalists there. I'm sure more will be coming over from Turin when Italy play, which is on Wednesday. But what I just thought was interesting about that press conference is how different the dynamic is without Yannick Sinner. Yannick Sinner so clearly the leader of that team over the past couple of years, and now without Lorenzo Musetti as well, there is a real who's going to step up here? Who is going to be the leader? And that question was
Berrettini?
Well, it was put to Flavio Cobolli.
I mean, the only clear answer for me is not Flavio Cobolli.
Flavio Cobolli agrees.
Right, yeah. He knows himself, I think. Yeah.
Despite being the highest ranked player, he just gives off an energy of little boy, really, does Cobolli. And he said, I'm the highest ranked, but I'm the youngest. And he was very, very keen to sort of downplay any kind of leadership role. And he basically said, what I think is true, we're all pretty much level now, He didn't reference Yannick Sinner, but I think he was, he was sort of saying it basically in between the lines. Everyone has to be a leader in this team now. And I think you're right. Matteo Berrettini, given what he did last year in this competition, given his sort of general pedigree, I think he will probably be looking to step up. So it's just interesting, and it obviously means that the captain, Filippo Volandri, hasn't had to make too many decisions, really. I suppose he's had to pick his number 2, and he's had to put Sinner into the doubles, but he's known that Yannick Sinner is his number 1 and his go-to guy. It changes the role of the captain, I think, when you don't have such a sure bet. They've got Berrettini here, they've got Cobolli, and they've got Sonego, all who could play singles, are all in slightly different patches of form, I would suggest. So he's got options there to play with, and the difference is they're playing Austria in their opening tie, and that is pretty much the kindest draw they could have got. And even without Sinner and Musetti, I think they're very, very heavy favourites in that one.
That's the second quarter-final, so that's Italy against Austria on Wednesday. Talk me through the Austrian team. Who have we got there? Filip Miselic is a name I'm pulling out. And
Yes.
I'm going to say Sebastian Offner.
No.
Where's he from?
They've got Yuri Rodionov and Filip Miselic as their two
Is Sebastian
main
Offner
singles players.
not Austrian?
I think he is Austrian.
Where is he at?
He has not been part of this team.
If he's in the Maldives, that's a joke. Okay, we will inquire after Sebastian Offner.
They are captained by Jürgen Meltzer, and there's quite a nice little link there because Meltzer beat Volandri, who is the Italian captain, to win his first ever ATP title back in Bucharest in 2006. So those two go back.
Right wrist injury, Sebastian Offner. He's off the hook.
The mainstays, the guys who've got them to this position, if you look at the qualifying rounds that they played in January, February, and then in September, are Rodionov and Neumayer, and both of them won both of their singles rubbers, and I mean they beat some serious players as well. Neumayer beat Virtanen, who we've obviously seen a lot of in the Davis Cup in time gone by, in a 4-0 win against Finland, and then they beat Hungary 3-2, and they beat Marijan and Fucsovics respectively. Did Rodionov and Neumayer. I mean those are good wins, and they were like proper close ones. They were 7-5 in the third and 7-6 in the third. So those were pretty dramatic scenes. And then they eventually had to go all the way to the fifth rubber. So they were 2-0 up. Then they lost the doubles. Then they lost the reverse singles. So it's 2-2. And then Rodionov beat Fucsovics 6-2, 6-1 to win the whole thing.
And yet, David, they are heavy underdogs against Italy. Even those heroics would be put in the shade by being able to pull off any kind of upset against Italy. Let's be honest. I mean, there are two members of the Austrian team I fully haven't heard of: Lukas Miedler and Alexander Zverev. Could we pick those two out of a lineup? Good luck to them, is what I say. Good luck against Andrea Vavasori.
But I do love that, you know.
To come through there.
It's I mean, and they won their doubles. I mean, another epic against Finland, 4-6, 7-6, 7-6 in the doubles in the first round, the first qualifying round. Did Erler and Miedler, but you know, I'm fascinated by this. I mean, I knew Jürgen Melzer a bit as a player. I remember he reached the Wimbledon boys final the year after he won the Wimbledon boys final the year after Federer won it. So in 1999, and obviously he had such a long career as a player, and he always felt like that sort of underdog character, a little bit like Paul Harhaus, a little bit sort of the guy who ends up beating somebody that you really don't expect. I mean, he's the one who beat Djokovic, wasn't he, over 5 sets? Wasn't it from 2 sets to love down? He was the guy. Mm-hmm. Pretty amazing.
French Open 2010, I think.
Yeah. I think he'll revel in that underdog sort of system, but at the same time, I mean, just rankings-wise, they are up against it.
And if Italy do defend their title again, they would become the first team to win 3 consecutive Davis Cup titles since the challenge round was abolished in 1971. Now, obviously, wow. I think it is a slightly different and slightly less of an undertaking now to win the Davis Cup compared to what it was like in the old format, where you would, you know, have to play all year long and home and away. Like, it is different, but that would put into some perspective, I think, this era of Italian tennis and dominance that we're in right now. And look, Sinner and Musetti not being there definitely weakens them, but you know, home crowds, often players play even better, and they're on quite a good side of the draw, really, I would say. So I do think they've got a hell of a shot of winning it for the 3rd time in a row.
We are always talking about the depth of Italian men's tennis, aren't we? I mean, they've obviously got Yannick Sinner at the top there, but we're always joking during Grand Slams that there are just Italians crawling out of the woodwork. I mean, this is a really interesting test of that depth. If they can win the Davis Cup without Sinner and Musetti, that's a heck of a statement about Italian men's tennis. And just incidentally, in terms of the interest in the number of locals that have bought tickets, did you see the viewing figures that have come out overnight for the final last night in Turin in Italy? I haven't got them in front of me in terms of concrete numbers, but my jaw did drop to the floor because, you know, TV doesn't get viewing figures anymore, doesn't it? Nobody's watching linear TV all at the same time, with the exception being being sport, but the numbers were similar to what the Italian football team get in major tournament matches. Something like 30% of the population were watching Yannick Sinner against Carlos Alcaraz last night, and we were talking seriously mainstream sporting numbers here. It's mega. So that's Italy against Austria on Wednesday. We start tomorrow, Tuesday, with France against Belgium. Now, here's a David Law-coded team for you. France is it's Corentin Moutet. It's Arthur Rinderknecht. It is Giovanni Mpessi-Pericard, who's a late call-up, Matt. He's the one that's come in for Ugo and Bear, is that right? So Rinderknecht, Moutet, Mpessi-Pericard, Benjamin Bonzi, who had a really fantastic middle part of the season, just kept on beating Daniil Medvedev, didn't he? And then in the year of our Lord, 2025, Pierre-Hugues Herbert. What a mixed bag of people that is.
Well, imagine my shock when I walked past Richard Gasquet earlier. I was thinking, surely he's not playing in the year of our Lord 2025.
Well, genuine, is he just? Why is he there? Is he a mascot?
I think he must be part of the backroom team or something. You know, he was all in his French tracksuit.
Just can't give it up, David.
I have to say,
hopes for Team France.
Pretty high. I mean, they were the best dressed, I thought, at the suited and booted event that they went to. That is all over the Davis Cup website. They've almost done like a carousel of photos of each team lined up in their respective outfits, and I personally think that they are comfortable winners in the coolest outfit look. Not that I'm any great shakes when it comes to knowing about the fashion. But I do think Czechia with their sort of turtlenecks, I'm not so sure on that one. And then you've got Germany. You've only got the 4 players, including the captain, because Zverev's not turned up yet. But France, I like the vibe of it. I mean, Rinderknecht has obviously had the season of his life. So has Moutet. They are not the most obvious selections. I think if you've got used to these big names really from French tennis, whether it's Tsonga or I mean Gasquet is an ever present. You've got Monfils, players like this from years gone by, and I think if in the first tie that played against Brazil in the qualifying, it was Fils, and he was the main name, and then of course his injury has forced him out. But it's really quite impressive, I think, the way Moutet and Rinderknecht then stepped up, and managed to kind of come through their tie against Croatia. In Croatia, that's not easy to do. They went to Osijek in Croatia, which would have been pretty good atmosphere for Croatia. They'd got Marin Cilic playing for them at the time. They'd got Mektic and Pavic in the doubles as well, but France won all the singles. They won the whole thing. They didn't even play the last one because they won it 3-1. Moutet getting the decisive win over Marin Cilic. And I know Cilic isn't necessarily what he was, and he may have been feeling it physically, but he is also a guy who beat Jack Draper at Wimbledon, and I think that is a great effort for Moutet, who also beat the young lad Dino Prismic in the first rubber in that tie. So I'm a bit surprised at what a team player he appears to be at the moment, because my sense has always been that France, as a tennis nation, if you maybe would have spoken to some of the elder statesmen or the teammates, I'm not sure they would have thought that Moutet was going to be their guy for a Davis Cup. But he has really bought in, and he's shown that he is that guy. And he speaks well. When you hear him speak, he sounds really up for it, and he sounds really proud to be part of it. And I guess maybe there's a maturing element to it. And I think that they're a cool team, and I think that they'll be really into it. I mean, it's interesting that their captain is Paul Henri Matthieu, who obviously we remember from the Davis Cup of that horror show against Mikhail Yuzhny when he was 2-0 up and he was multiple breaks up and he's about to win the
This is his
Davis
redemption
Cup.
arc, David.
Yeah, I love it,
his
really.
emotion if he manages to lead France to victory.
Yeah, and I mean,
quite a redemptive arc.
I do think it's a good tie though. Them against Belgium is a good tie. I mean, I think France on paper are favourites, but then so were Australia against Belgium. You know, I mean, we're talking about teams that was the feature of the whole qualifying round in September was countries going away to really big nations that have won the Davis Cup lots of times, Australia, United States, Croatia, and beating these smaller teams in many cases, beating the big nation on their home soil. And I mean, what Belgium did going to Australia to beat Dimonor, that is seriously impressive. So I think we're in for a really interesting tie because Belgium have obviously got Zizou Bergs, who's done a lot of solid stuff over the last year or two, but then they've got the guy Collignon, who's just played absolutely out of his mind in that tie, and seems to be a real kind of frightening prospect for a lot of these teams.
And Alexander Blocks, who we might not see play, but he's a name that is on people's radar as a talent for the future. He's 20 now, I think, but he was a very talented junior. He's in that transition phase, trying to transition from the juniors into the seniors, and they've got a good solid doubles team that play together a lot. Have the Belgians Gilles and Vliegen. Just quickly, Matt, before we get your thoughts on this tie, David has teed me up to volunteer one of my potentially unpopular tennis opinions, which is that I don't ever want to see tennis players in suits. At their wedding, they can wear a suit. Fine. I hate it. The ATP Finals photo shoot. You've got all these young, cool, most of them, hot guys, a lot of them with fashion brand deals, and they're just there wearing a sort of corporate, ill-fitting suit, looking like they're in a uniform. It's so shit. Looking through the Davis Cup photos, you've got the carousel. And you go through the teams. The Spanish team, I mean, I bet Alcaraz was glad he managed to swerve that photo shoot. They all look like they're dressed as line judges.
And they're the ones wearing chinos.
Scrolling along, and then David Haggerty pops up, and it looks like he's just wearing the same as the teams. They should not be dressed like David Haggerty. It's just... let them look cool, for God's sake. I hate
Not
it.
into the turtlenecks.
I actually, controversially, David, think as much as I hate a turtleneck on a man generally, I actually think that's the best look because it's a bit different. It's not. They don't look like they're about to offer me a glass of champagne, which I would gladly accept from any of the Italian team. Matt, serious takes on this first quarter-final?
Well, David's outlined, the respective teams and all of that really well. I think the thing that jumps out to me is how absent these two nations have been from the Davis Cup finals. Like they played a Davis Cup final against each other as recently as 2017 did France and Belgium, and yet
I was there.
And yet with the new format, they haven't really bought into it. Like I think they absolutely could have done better in this competition, but they have sulked a little bit at the change of format. And look, I think a lot of us understand where they're coming from, but I think it has probably affected their performance. And what's interesting is now, I think David's right, this sort of slightly new look team has maybe given France a bit of a fresh feeling and a bit of fresh impetus in this competition. And there's a sort of togetherness there. Plus, you've got Pierre-Hugues Herbert, who actually I thought spoke very well on the format today. He said the new format has been challenging for us in France, I think, especially for me, because I felt like something a bit died in this competition. But then he said, I can say, though, that this year I felt something growing, something that's a bit different from the past years. And he's referencing there the fact that they had the 2 rounds of home and away. You know, it felt like they were in this competition on the road together, like they used to be. And he said, I rediscovered the love a bit for the competition. So he's kind of prepared to give this final 8 a proper chance. So I kind of liked that perspective there from Herbert, recognising, okay, it's not what it was, but there's still something here and something to be enjoyed. And then, you know, as I said, Belgium, they were led by David Goffin for so many years, weren't they, in that period where they reached 2 finals, losing to Great Britain, of course, and France. You know, very impressive little period there for Belgium, but haven't had the same success. And now it is the likes of Collignon and Bergs who are going to try and get over the line for them. I think it's quite an open one, this. Like, I think France would probably be slight favourites, but Collignon has a win over Casper Ruud this year. You know, like, I think he can play up, and I think it's possible that he could get Belgium off to a good start, and then, you know, suddenly Rinne-Knecht, it's all on him to keep France alive. I think they're 2 tight singles matches, and then you know, who knows for the doubles. So yeah, I'm quite excited for that one to kick things off tomorrow.
Yeah, me too. I think that's a fun tie to start with. My phone offered me an On This Day in 2017 video yesterday, and I clicked on it, and it was La Marseillaise being sung around the stadium in Lille to open that Davis Cup final. And it gave me chills. Incredible moment. So we'll get the Marseillaise tomorrow to kick off these Davis Cup finals. That is it for part 1. Join us in part 2 and we'll chat about the second 2 quarterfinals. Welcome back to part 2 of the tennis podcast. Moving on to Thursday, which is a double header. Pray for Matt Roberts on Thursday. It starts with Spain against Czechia. And now Spain, obviously captained by David Ferrer, led by Carlos Alcaraz. They also have Jaume Munar, Pablo Carreño Busta, Pedro Martinez and Marcel Granollers. And Team Czechia is led by Jiri Lehečka. They have Jakub Menšik, Thomas Mahac, Vit Kapriva and Adam Pavlicek, who should be requesting a new photo on his Davis Cup website bio. Because I was shocked to click on his photo and discover he was 31. Talk us through this tie. I mean, look, it's so kind of... This is so all about Alcaraz, isn't it? But, yeah, talk us through it, Matt. Who you expect to play? Is Thomas Mahac going to get a match? Is Thomas Mahac a Davis Cup guy?
I mean, he has been in the past. He has been. He's played well for Czechia in the past. But I think what's interesting about the Czech team is that, you know, the dynamic of it has changed over the course of the season, you know, because I think at the start of the season it would have been probably Lehečka and Mahac as the 2 first choice singles options. But Menšik, with the season he's had, certainly the first half of the season that he had, has kind of, you know, usurped Mahac, certainly in the rankings. And if they line up in rankings order, then it would be Lehečka and Menšik. And, you know, I think when they face a Spain with an Alcaraz, there is perhaps a sort of tendency to maybe overthink things in that Czech camp. You know, you sort of think, oh, you know, have we got an option to try and beat Carlos Alcaraz? And therefore, do you think maybe Menšik's your best chance? Well, that means you have to play Menšik against Alcaraz, which means you have to play Mahac in the number 2. It means you have to leave Lehečka out altogether. And I think that's probably overthinking things. I think they should probably stick with Lehečka against Alcaraz, who, you know, he's got a win over Alcaraz, hasn't he? I know it was in Doha. It was a tight match at Queen's that they played. I thought Lehečka played well at the US Open against Alcaraz, but still lost in straight sets. But I think you go Lehečka as your number 1, and then you make a choice between Menšik and Mahac as your number 2. And I would probably, you know, despite being at one time chief leader of the Thomas Mahatch Best Player in the World fan club. If I were Thomas Burdick, I would probably be leaning Jakub Mensik in this situation, especially as he won the decisive match, didn't he, for them against the US? He won the fifth match there. You know, he's played with that pressure very recently in this competition. But great that Czechia have had their strong team the whole year. You know, all of these guys have made themselves available at every round. And I think, you know, I spoke to Thomas Burdick in the press conference today, and he was pumped about that. You know, I think he really senses that there's a chance here for Czechia to win this competition again. You know, he won it as a player, and this is kind of the first time since then that they've got a group of players that you can really look at and think, actually, they could do some serious damage and are contenders to win this competition. So that's Czechia. For Spain, well, let me first of all say just as well that Alejandro Davidovich Fokina is not in the team, because if he didn't like playing at 11 a.m. on tour earlier in the year, he would have had to have started at 10 a.m. On Thursday. So perhaps David Ferrer has played a really long game there and thought, nope, he's not a 10 a.m. guy, therefore he's not on the team at all. I think what's actually happened is some slightly, slight bit of in team aggro, really. You know, I think Spain were expecting Alejandro Davidovich Fokina to play in the previous round in that qualifier, and he didn't. And I think David Ferrer has wanted to reward the people that did play and got him through.
What do you think of that captaincy? Is it cutting off your nose to spite your face, letting your pride get in the way?
And of course it's not totally consistent, because Carlos Alcaraz didn't play either,
right.
and he's happy enough to bring him back in. But you know, there is a difference between Carlos Alcaraz and Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. Like, should you be treating them in the same way?
He'll be asleep, but fit.
He said he was arriving in a van from Turin to Bologna, and he was not lying. He literally did arrive in a van.
He arrived in a van, got out of the van, did some adorable interaction with a baby, looked thrilled with life, like, we're so back.
Yeah.
What do we think of that decision from David Ferrer and the reasoning behind it, David?
I do think, from listening to Ferrer at least, he seemed to be making out that it had happened multiple times as well, that he'd asked him to play and he'd sort of kind of let him down multiple times, which I think if that's the case, then I think I understand it. And there is a bit of X factor to Davidovich Fokina. I think he has a higher upside than Jaume Munar and all the other players that aren't Carlos Alcaraz on that team. So I can understand the temptation to just go with it anyway. But if he does, I think he probably gets on fine with all the other players. I've never noticed any issues with the other players generally when you've been out on the tour. That's not been my sense. But I think if they are all putting their hands up and Ferrer's pissed off with him for not doing so, I think you do risk disrupting things. And especially if it sounds like there is real animosity between Ferrer and Davidovich Fokina just directly, you know, and I can't remember anybody ever falling out with David Ferrer. So that does feel like something that you probably do need to make a stand on at some point. I mean, I am, when we get on to Germany, I mean, I'm going to be quite interested to see what it's like with Zverev, the way that he's sort of made out like it's not that big a deal, and he's doing it for Struffy, and he's doing it for the team, which maybe that'll get them over the line. But if he will probably, his competitive instincts will probably come out and he'll probably play well. But I do think team spirit matters, and like what Thomas Burdick has said there about Czechia, I think is a real thing. I think that makes them greater than the sum of their parts because they've been in it since month one. I think that they're going to be a formidable prospect because of that, as well as their individual skill. So I back Ferrer on that one.
And it's been an odd time, I think, for the Spanish Davis Cup team, because they've obviously hosted the Davis Cup finals for a number of years in a row, and they won the one in Madrid, didn't they, in 2019, when Rafael Nadal was incredible. And one of the most remarkable things I've personally ever witnessed was what Roberto Bautista Agut did that week, going back after the death of his father and coming back and playing a tie. It was incredibly moving and emotional and pretty extraordinary, really. So they had that success in 2019, but then they've had a series of slightly odd Davis Cups since then. There was one year they didn't qualify for the finals, and then obviously last year they were playing the Davis Cup finals, but what they were actually doing was a vehicle for Rafael Nadal's retirement, and those two things overlapped to such an extent that they ended up losing in the quarterfinals, even though they had Carlos Alcaraz on their team, and now that period of hosting it is over. They've lost that home advantage, and now they're having to come here to Bologna and try and win it not on home turf. So I sort of think that might be helpful for them in that sense. There's just been a lot going on with the Spanish Davis Cup team over the last few years. It sounds like there still is, of course, with this whole Davidovich Fokina Ferrer situation, but it's very different to last year, where it was all about Nadal. And I think this year, Alcaraz coming in, okay, there's that little concern with his hamstring. He very much played it down in his press, didn't he? But he's in great form. We saw the tennis he played, and I think it feels like they're primed to play better at the Davis Cup finals than they have done in recent years. But they've got a hell of a tie there against Czechia. I think Burdick is of the opinion that the winner of that goes on to win it. I think he's seeing that as a bit of a de facto final. He really backs his own team, but he knows Spain are strong with Alcaraz, and it's kind of a shame, really, that it is happening in the quarterfinals. But it's massive, that one, because they're both such strong sides.
For what it's worth on Ferrer, I think either this is the right decision, but he shouldn't have had to make it, or I feel like there has to be some slightly questionable captaincy somewhere along the line. The fact that this decision has had to be made with Davidovich Fokina, even if it's the right one, the fact that Davidovich Fokina has been reluctant to play and he hasn't, but galvanising a team and getting them wanting to play for you is a big part of captaincy.
That's true. Yep.
So, and look, that probably comes from a place of just not having all that much confidence in Ferrer's decision making after last year. I do think he botched it last year, so I feel like he's got something to prove to me. I'm sure that's his main priority. Must prove Catherine Whitaker's assessment of me wrong. But yeah, I just feel like whether it's the creation of the situation or whether it's the decision itself to not select Davidovich Fokina, something there smacks of it, just the leadership not being quite as good as it could be to me. Maybe that's unfair.
Just a very sort of minor, probably quite meaningless, but quite nice sort of little stat around this one is obviously we've got Ferrer and Burdick as our captains here, which is, you think they were such a sort of in such a similar position for so long, right? Just sort of unable to quite break through the big four's grip on the game, and actually went 8-8 in their head-to-head against each other as players. So you could maybe see this as a little decider.
One Grand Slam final each. Yeah,
and like real maximisers, I think, as well. And I think it is interesting how many, of that sort of age of player really have gone on to become Davis Cup captains. Like I think this competition has probably lost something, but it does still retain the prestige in terms of people wanting to kind of give back to it, I think, and be part of the team again. You got Jürgen Melzer, that generation, who we've already mentioned as well. So, I think that is quite nice, that kind of connection from previous successful teams onto this new one.
The final quarter-final, the last match to be played on Thursday. What time does this match start, Matt? So the first one starts at 10 a.m.
And I believe this one's not before 5 p.m.
Okay. It is Germany against Argentina. Germany, led by Alexander Zverev, said he'd never play the Davis Cup in this format, but the call of Struffy was just too strong. So Zverev, Struffy, that is Jan-Lennard Struff to you and I, Yannick Hanfmann, Kevin Kravitz and Tim Putt's very strong team on paper. They take on Argentina, led by Francisco Cerundolo, Thomas Martin Echeverri, Francisco Comesaña, Horacio Zeballos and Andres Molteni. How do we see this, David?
Well, I do think Germany do look like a really strong team there on paper, and I would make them favourites for that one. I mean, we have had in the past trouble for Zverev with Cerundolo. He won their most recent one. I think it was a retirement in the end, but he won the first set of it. But he has had problems with him in the past. But I do think that this is the surface on which he would most like to play him, Zverev. So I think he will be the favourite there. Struff, I know he goes on these incredible runs of not winning matches, but he also can look like the most awesome player at times when he's on, and I just think he's going to be better qualified than whoever Argentina put up really as a number 2 on that surface. So I think that they are real threats, actually, Germany. So I would pick them to win that one. I don't know what you two think.
I do think this is a weird dynamic that Zverev has created by saying, sort of, he's trying to have his cake and eat it, isn't he? He's saying, I'm here for the team, which should be galvanising. But he's also cleverly making out like, I don't care that much. I'm a hero. I'm here for you, my comrades, but I don't care that much personally. And I'm not sure. I mean, look, that might not actually end up being true once he gets out there in the field of battle, and that might be a way of, if you don't try, you can't fail. It might be that kind of psychology. But I do think that's a slightly odd, unusual dynamic to have within a team. What do you think, Matt?
Yes, I agree. I mean, his language around the Davis Cup is, he doesn't mince his words. He called some of it a waste of time, and yet here he is playing. It is an odd dynamic for sure, but he does make them stronger. I think that odd dynamic is offset by the quality he brings to the team, and I think overall they are a stronger proposition with him here. It's interesting because Argentina have got 2 guys who could play the number 2 singles against, we expect, Struffy, in Echeverri and Comesaña, both of who are quite tough to beat. Neither of those are absolute gimmies for Struffy. I'm just going to keep saying Struffy, I think, now for the tournament. And I think the outcome of that could really influence the dynamic of Cerundolo against Zverev. If Cerundolo is 1-0 up for Argentina and can go for it a little bit against Zverev and swing with that forehand and try and get into Zverev's head. I spoke to Cerundolo today in the press conference and I mentioned his record against Zverev, and he said, yes, there's something about my game which bothers him. He's very aware of that. He was quick to clarify, as you did, David, that surface-wise, his 3 wins have been on clay against Alexander Zverev. But I think a couple of them have been in Madrid, which are very good conditions for Alexander Zverev. He likes playing there. I know it's clay, but that's a good court. And I think Zverev might even have called it his favourite court in the world, didn't he? The Madrid centre court. And yet Cerundolo has beaten him there. Player. Exactly. So I think there is something in the matchup there for Cerundolo, and I just think with a bit of momentum behind them as a team, and maybe with what I expect to be sort of passionate support, I think we could see the best of Cerundolo. And if we don't see the best of Zverev, if there is a weird dynamic, I think he could have his hands full there against Cerundolo, even on an indoor hard court. So that's my case for Argentina, but they're going to have to play extremely well, because I do agree with David that Germany are favourites here.
Interesting team selection, I think, ahead for Argentina, isn't it, for that number 2 position?
Yeah.
Because Echeverry is your solid ball machine. Comesaña,
He's a bit flashier.
It depends which side of the bed he gets out of. I saw him beat Zverev earlier this year, and then he beat Artifice in Madrid when Fils was winning handily, and then suddenly, he just starts turning it on, and he really gets the crowd growing. He's one of those. I think the Italians could suddenly start getting into him if he played. So that would be quite interesting, and I kind of feel like his game might work against a big server in a way, just that hand-eye ball coordination and so forth. But whether he'll get the nod, it would be quite a risk, I think.
And there is an interesting dynamic on the Argentinian team with those 3 singles guys, Cerundolo, Comesaña, Echeverry, all extremely close in age. I think all know each other and have known each other for a long time. And then you've got the 2 older doubles guys in Zeballos and Molteni. So there's kind of the 2 generations there. And there's also a very different vibe between the 3 singles guys. They're quite different personalities. Francisco Cerundolo is very articulate and quite charming in a press conference. Echeverry's quite serious and, well, in fact, very serious. And Comesaña kind of is a bit like Caboli and is a bit playful, a bit boyish. He was messing with his microphone during the press conference. They had to tell him to stop doing that because the transcript was picking it up. But I think, as kind of to David's point, he is more likely probably to provide a spark. He might have a shocker. I think you know what you're going to get from Echeverry. I think Echeverry's the safe pick. But Comesaña's...
He's got them there. He's got a couple of wins along the way in the qualifying. But, if you're just picking somebody to razzle-dazzle a bit...
Right. So I
think we all know which one we're not inviting to the party. You've painted a real picture there, Matt. Love it. Okay, that is it for part 2. Join us in part 3 for punchy predictions. Welcome back to part 3 of the Tennis Podcast, our Davis Cup preview show. I want predictions. I want them to be punchy, please. These quarterfinals, who's winning them? France or Belgium?
France.
Italy or Austria?
Italy.
So we've got France against Italy. Who's winning that?
France.
I'll go Italy.
Okay, second set of quarterfinals. Spain against Czechia.
I'm going Spain.
Czechia.
Germany against Argentina.
Germany.
Okay, so David, you've got Czechia, Germany. Who's winning that?
Czechia.
So you have a Czechia, France final. Matt, you have Spain against Germany. Who's winning that?
Spain.
So you have a Spain-Italy final. Who are your champions? David.
I am really into this team dynamic of Czechia and their strength in depth. They've got 3 singles players and a doubles pairing from that singles combination that have got them there. They've been there all the way through, and they went away to the United States and they were 2-1 down and they beat Fritz and Tiafoe to get over the line. I'm just hugely impressed with that, and I am going to go for them as the champions. And you've got this perennial question mark: do you take the singles great Alcaraz in the first, because it could be Spain that just knocked them out in the first one. They've got Alcaraz, or do you go with the strong team? And I mean, I just think they might edge it. They might just find a way. If they and I agree with Thomas Burdick. If they get through that, I think that they win it.
Matt.
Yes, I agree with Thomas Burdick, actually. I think the winner of the whole thing is coming from the Czechia-Spain tie. I just think I'm going with Alcaraz. I'm going with the big number one player.
Who's winning the Davis Cup? Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, basically, in the same way that Yannick Sinner has won the Davis Cup in the last couple of years with some help. I think Alcaraz with some help. And I was really sold on just how much Alcaraz kept mentioning the Davis Cup during the ATP finals and how much he wanted it. I think he's going to bring it. And also, I have been quietly impressed with Munar this year. I think he is a good number two. I think he would be favourite. Maybe not favourite, but I think I would back Munar to win the number two matches, maybe apart from against Czechia. That is
so.
The tricky
what would
one.
they do in the doubles, Matt? What do you think
they'd
Spain are
probably
going to be doing?
I think they'd probably go with what they tried last year, and it didn't go that well. But Alcaraz and Granollers, I think they would probably pair together.
That was bad, though.
I think the circumstances of Nadal made that odd. And they were up against, let's not forget, Wesley Koolhof playing out of his mind on that day. I think with a bit
and I think
different circumstances, I think they could be better.
Made Alcaraz, it fried him a bit, didn't it?
And Alcaraz is better this year. That's another factor, just generally.
It's still quite unproven in doubles, I would say.
Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Alcaraz.
I mean, last night I made the case for Italy in my sort of haven't really given this any thought yet moment. But when we were going through the team there, and in the absence of Sinner and Musetti, I think there's a lot of stock in what Volandri puts together. I think he seems like a really solid team captain, and I really think Berrettini's an important presence, regardless of how much he plays. But I do wonder whether they as a team will feel a little bit lost, especially Caboli. As much as I love watching Caboli, I do think it could get to him, this.
But then, Matt, you said that the presence of Sinner had its own complications. Like, it hasn't always been plain sailing. Yannick Sinner's place in that team and dynamic he creates. Like, I don't quite know what the edge is, but there has been the edge detected.
Yeah, not a negative edge, I wouldn't say. It's just serious. When Sinner's around, it's about winning. And they absolutely knew that. And I think, they were talking
maybe
a lot
Caboli
about...
will like the slightly less serious
Yeah, possibly.
edge.
The word Volandri kept using in the press conference was responsibility. We feel a responsibility because we're playing at home. And I just think, without their two best players, that is putting quite a lot on the team. As I said, look, I've still got them in my final. I do think they've certainly got enough to get through Austria. I think if they were to play France, that's a close tie, but I would think maybe they've got enough. But I think they're going to have a good tournament. I guess I'm just not picking them to actually win it.
I do think for Alcaraz, I don't think this is, front of his mind. And like, I wish this weren't something that were occurring to me. But, Yannick Sinner's getting an extra week off that he's not. And, Alcaraz could be having this week off. He's choosing to play the Davis Cup. He cares about it. He's there of his own free will. He wants to play. But that equation, that decision might be different for him as it is for Yannick Sinner if he's already ticked it off his list. I do think it's probably better for the Davis Cup if Alcaraz keeps on not winning it with Spain, because he's more likely to keep showing up.
And there is also in the back of my mind, David asked about doubles for Spain. If the hamstring is a problem for Alcaraz, if he has to play singles and doubles, that's putting a lot on him for sure. I guess I'm just assuming that in that position, he won't be able to stop himself. And, if they're 1-1 and he's just brought it back by winning the singles, he's going to want to go out there and play doubles, I would have thought.
Yeah, like a Labrador puppy.
What's your pick, Catherine?
I think probably Spain, even though that is not... My head is saying... I mean, I've got David Ferrer doubts, but then it's Carlos. I always pick Carlos Alcaraz. Our friend Itamar texted last night, but before the Sinner Alcaraz match, saying, who are you picking? And I was like, well, obviously Sinner's the favourite for this, but I just always pick Carlos Alcaraz. So I'm going to pick Carlos Alcaraz. But there's a part of me that wants to pick France, because I think it would be the perfect mix of like an incredible story with the Paul Henri Matthieu of it all, with what you said about Moutet, David. I think he's a bit of a story of this year. And also just funny. Like, great emotional story plus funny. Plus La Marseillaise. Like, I think that would be awesome.
That is a sweet spot. But I haven't gone through 5 months of Spanish citizenship admin not to pick Spain to win the Davis Cup. So
he's got an agenda, folks. You've disclosed your bias. We should do that up front, really, shouldn't we? Okay, well, we got a lot of pods coming up, folks. Our next one will be on Thursday after the quarterfinals are done and dusted. So Matt will have been up earlier than Alejandro Davidovich Fokina. Getting to the stadium, watching both matches, reporting on them, and then coming on the pod to talk about them. So pray for Matt.
It very much is apparently a pray for Matt, and this is a real get the violins out situation, because apparently the media seats in the stadium are severely lacking in comfort. Very poor lumbar support, Catherine, and very, very shallow. Like David would not fit in the seat, I think is basically what we're dealing with here. So
I just stand.
Please pray for me.
If I was there, I'd be not taking that well.
I did already say, maybe I could bring a cushion or something from the hotel. Learning from the best.
Yeah.
You've
got to withstand.
You've done many a walk to
people
Roland Garros with a cushion.
Comment on you carrying a cushion under your arm, but
I can channel you.
You'll be having the last laugh when you're sat there with your lumbar support. Let me tell you, it's worth it. Okay, pray for Matt. We'll be back to hear all about Matt's lumbar support on Thursday. Then we'll be back again on Saturday. Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Sunday is live after the Davis Cup final, the official final match of the 2025 season. Don't forget you can keep up to date with the Davis Cup finals on the Davis Cup Instagram, TikTok and X. You can sign up to the free official Davis Cup newsletter at daviscup.com, and you can follow all the action on the newly updated World Cup of Tennis app, which brings together the Davis Cup and Billie Jean King Cup by Gamebridge. Search World Cup of Tennis on the App Store or Play Store to download for free. And I can vouch for that because I did it earlier successfully. Hello to our mascots, Phoebe, Maisie and Roger. Hello to our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris and Jeff. Matt, can you do on-location shout-outs?
I can, yep.
We can do everything, folks.
We have Vicky. The wonderful Vicky has prepared some shout-outs for us. And we start with Alison Rowe from Wellington, New Zealand.
Hello, Alison.
Hi, Alison.
Like Alison, what's her surname? The umpire. Hughes.
Very good.
And Alison Risk. And my sister.
Hey.
There we go. The big three.
And if we want to make it the big four, like Alison Danzig, who was a legendary tennis journalist. I believe the first journalist inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame. Someone I frequently read about while at at the Wimbledon
first
Library.
journalist inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame was a woman.
No, it's a man called Alison.
It's more likely that there'd be a man called Alison than that the
Correct.
first journalist inducted would be a woman.
Yeah.
Yep, sorry, silly me. What do we know about Alison?
Alison has been listening to the pod since 2015, so celebrating a 10-year anniversary.
Congratulations, Alison.
That's
Just
excellent
about when we
news.
sort of figured out what we were doing, 2015, I would say. Good time to join us. And Wellington reminds me that every year I say I'm going to tick New Zealand off my list. And I don't. But I'm coming soon, Alison. New Zealand better be ready for me. Thank you, Alison.
Next up, we have Marjorie Graven. And
Hello, Marjorie.
We've met Marjorie. I met Marjorie at the Australian Open. The day after her previous shout-out came out on the pod. That was in 2024. I remember that.
So you'll see Marjorie tomorrow?
Right. That's the way this thing works. And David also met Marjorie at the Australian Open, I believe, this year. And apparently you had a chat, read, complain about the court by the bar at Melbourne Park.
Oh.
Yeah, that rings a bell.
Okay,
So,
Hi, Marjorie.
I hope to
Marjorie
meet
is
you, Marjorie.
expecting Catherine in 2026.
I'll be waiting for you, Marjorie. Like my great aunt Marjorie, to continue the family theme of these shout-outs. Can't
Very
think
good.
of a tennis one. There's no. We'll go with my great aunt Marjorie.
And also, Marjorie, I don't know why I didn't lead with this, really. It's much more exciting than meeting David and me. Marjorie was lucky enough to get a selfie with Pam at the US Open this year.
Go on, Marjorie.
Good work, Marjorie.
And Marjorie posted it on the barge. Epic work.
I mean, just textbook.
Marjorie sounds great, yeah. Thank you, Marjorie.
And finally, we have Lars Graf.
Hey! Right, Lars.
Lars Graf.
Umpire
Oh,
extraordinaire.
bless
Now the tournament director of Beijing China Open.
Bless him.
Right, Lars.
Oh.
Like Lars Graf, the umpire.
Like Lars Graf, the umpire. Yeah.
And Lars says, I've listened to all the podcasts since you started.
Oh my God.
Good man, Lars.
Yeah, he has a lot of time on planes, doesn't he, Lars, I'm imagining. So, I love that. I love Lars's continued dedicated support of the podcast. It always gives me a chuckle. So, Lars, thank you. Lars, Alison and Marjorie, thank you for your support of the Tennis Podcast. We are part of the Athletic Podcast Network. We'll be back on Thursday. Thank you for listening or watching, however you've joined us, and we'll speak to you then.